public comments? Do we have any public comments? So far, we haven't had any.
I can make one if you want, Charlie.
What would you like to say, Darren?
I'm just joking. But put that in the record.
Yeah.
Did everyone have a chance to look at the minutes of our last meeting? Did anyone have any comments or propose any additions or corrections? Then we will accept those, and the next item on our agenda is hearing from Nathan. Is that right?
Do you want to take a motion and vote on the minutes?
No, I mean, we can, but
It's on,
what's the
it's on
point?
actually in this.
Okay, fine.
You can find Robert's rules actually.
All right,
Yeah. If we don't have any comments, we can just move right on.
all right.
So, would you like to introduce Nathan to us, Melissa?
Sure. This is Nathan DeJess. He's a local developer and lives in Williston. Has done some projects in Winooski and other places. And Nathan, feel free to kind of, give a more fleshed out intro, and then we can kind of move right in through the discussion.
Sounds great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I think you summed it up. I'm a real estate developer, also an engineer, kind of do a little bit of both. My wife and I run an engineering firm located in Winooski, and also a real estate development company. And I've been working on multifamily housing, some affordable, some market rate, starting in about 2016, primarily in Winooski and Burlington. We are looking at parcels nearby in Williston and South Burlington right now. So we're interested in any urban place interests us. That's where we like to be. And do you want me to kind of get started on what I was going to present today, or was there any other segue into that?
No, we had the executive director, the CEO of Habitat for Humanity in last month who talked to us about the cost of building and the advantages of getting grants, but the cost of building where the majority of the carpentry type work the non-union work is handled by volunteers. So now we're looking for information on what it costs for a developer to put together housing for us in this day and age. And our special interest is on affordable housing. So learning what it costs is going to make it easier for us to come up with a plan.
Okay, that sounds great. So what I had planned was I have a sample pro forma that's for a project that's actually based off of a real project. And a few things have been tweaked just to kind of keep it a little bit separate from that project. But other than that, it's kind of a real world project, and it's based off of pro forma that we actually use to analyze projects. And if I can share screen.
Yeah.
What I'm going to do is just kind of, it's not super formal. I'm just going to kind of walk through how the pro forma works, what the inputs are. And then I'd love to field questions on, what your curiosities might be on the challenges or what changes the bottom line more than other things. There's anything that you can think of. I think, as everyone knows, it's a pretty tough time right now when it comes to real estate development. There's incredible demand for housing, but the costs for the financing the projects and the cost for construction are, really, really high. So it's a very interesting time. And we're having to get quite creative. So just wanting to see how that formats for you. Are you able to read the text, or is it too small?
A little bigger would be nice, personally.
Okay. How does that look?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I'm going to try to go through this fairly quick, but not too quick, but please stop me if I'm going too fast. So this is the summary page of this pro forma. It is for a 20 unit project with 15 1-bedroom and 5 2-bedroom units. Pretty average sized units. This front page kind of summarizes the numbers that I have in there so far, and you'll see that we can play around with those numbers as we get going. So the total project cost is a little over 5.4 million. Its cost per unit is $270,000. That's for everything. Then coming down here, I won't get too much into everything that's going on in here yet. I'll just say that it's taking a look at your monthly and annual income, expense, the cost to finance the project, so your loan cost, and then it's kind of crunching the numbers and giving you a cash on cash return. This is a pretty simple formula. Some developers use a little bit more complex pro formas that will look at long-term cash flows in kind of analyzing, years 1 through say 15 to see if maybe over time you're projecting that your income and expenses might change. And oftentimes they look at the income maybe going up a little more than the expenses, and sometimes your long-term numbers actually start looking better. We actually don't do that because what we've found is over the years, those numbers stay pretty close. The income expense ratios stay pretty close. So the overall profitability doesn't, rise a ton over time is what we found. So we don't look at the long-term stuff. We're just wondering, like today, what is our cash on cash return? And that's simply much cash is in from investors. So on this project of 5.4 million, you're going to have $1 million in from investors. That's equity. And then you're going to finance 80%, which is 4.3 million. Financing that through some kind of a loan, typical bank loan or something like that. And given that, you look at what your net income is annually, and you can divide that by your cash in, and you can get a return. So out of that $1 million you have in, you're getting a little over $40,000 a year. That's a 4% return. So today that wouldn't really be considered a very good return, as you're able to get better than that many other places. What we would typically target is around 8 to 12% return. There is hope that there is an upside in the future with appreciation, but it's very hard to predict. So that's not something we typically throw into the mix, but it is something that as a developer you may think about. Is there an appreciation of a couple percent a year? There might be. So you could add that in, and that would increase your return. But we don't include that as part of our analysis, just because appreciation can go up and it can go down. So very simple analysis, and again, we would target 8 to 12. Now this pro forma also does compute a couple other things that you may or may not have heard of. The cap rate for the project as it stands with the cost to build it, the gross income multiplier, operating expense ratio, and debt service coverage ratios. And these are all items that we can take a look at and make sure are kind of hitting our benchmarks. And these are fairly, industry-wide, these are fairly common ranges that most developers or investors would want to see. Also, I should note, it's not even just developers and investors, it's also appraisers and the loan institution, the bank. They're going to want to see these metrics too. There's a lot of different layers that need to kind of make sure you're hitting these certain numbers. So that's kind of the summary page. I'm just going to jump through here on these tabs to my rental income page, which is going to allow us to put in what we think the rents will be and compute the monthly and annual incomes for the project. This is where we can really get into playing around with different affordability levels. I have this current mix in at a kind of a blended rate where you've got a few 1-bedrooms at 80%, a few at 90%, a few at 100%, and some 2-bedrooms at 120% AMI. And I'm just going to jump over, skip a few tabs to VHFA thresholds, which we use this chart quite often just to know where our rents land. And it's basically, this is the area median income in gray here for Chittenden County. And you can look across, the rows are the different percentages. Where we look is this middle area here, which is your max gross rent for various unit sizes. So studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. This is important because not only do municipalities have affordability requirements that reference percent AMI, sometimes they even reference this table, but there's also Act 250 guidance with priority housing projects. There could be tax incentives or other things that also have these limitations. So that's why these are critical. And then there's also just what market rent is today, and that's not really on this chart. I would say just from what I'm seeing, I mean, I guess you could say 100% would maybe be an indication of market rent, but today in Chittenden County, I would say it's somewhere between 80 and 110%, kind of depending on how things look. Which is what true market rate rents are. So from there, and please stop me if you want, and we can always go back if I'm going too fast. There's a lot here. So from there, again, this is the tool we look at as a developer going into a project. We're going to try to estimate our operating costs. We have a lot of different things we use for this. We have data from different appraisal reports. We have data from our own internal projects, things like that. So we're trying to estimate how much it's going to cost to operate this project. So we're estimating this 20-unit building is going to cost about $176,000 a year to operate. You'll see a big portion of that is taxes, management, maintenance, all that other stuff. Most of these buildings, the in-unit utilities are actually covered mostly by the tenant. So any of this stuff is more common area stuff here. From there, we go into project construction costs. Now, this is something we work on all the time, so we know it pretty well. However, it has rapidly evolved. Up until basically until the COVID impacts came, you could take your project from last year and you could pretty safely add 5 to 10% and be pretty safe on cost estimating for the next year. And that's mostly what people did. Now, after COVID, it was a whole different world on cost estimating, because we saw increases year over year in the 25 to 40% range, depending on which subcontractor or which division of the project it was. So we had to kind of rethink how we cost estimate, and now things have normalized some. But what we do a lot more now is getting some initial cost estimating from subcontractors, doing a lot more early on due diligence to try to see where these costs are coming in, because they've gone up so much. So this is an 18,000 square foot building. And right now what I have plugged in is $240 per square foot. For those that are kind of in this world, you'll know that multifamily housing is often talked about in dollars per square foot for the cost. It's a pretty common way to look at it. Also, dollars per unit, but the most common by far is square foot costs. So
Nathan, is that total cost of the built structure, everything inside the outer walls, or is it cost per occupied square foot?
It's cost for all construction. So site work, inside, outside, flooring, everything. All you need to do is bring in furniture, basically.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. And we used to be able to hit numbers like $120 to $175 a square foot, easily, pre-COVID. Now I put this 240 in here just for now. Today we're not seeing any projects in the 240 range. We're between 270 and 300 easily. And that's for more of the kind of the simple projects. There's a whole nother subject matter, which is building construction types. And if you see a wood building that's 4 stories, if you see a 6-story building that's half wood and half steel, or you see a 6 or 7-story building that's all steel, the cost for each of those 3 steps, it increases dramatically. There's often this thought that like the bigger the building, the more economy of scale you have, but it's not really true when you change construction type. So as you're adding, kind of the rule of thumb, if you add steel and concrete, it's going to increase your cost dramatically. So instead of being between $275 and $300 a square foot to build, you're probably going to be jumping right up into the mid 300s, if not more, to build that same building. And then we have project soft costs. So these are all of the things up front we have to do. Well, most of them are up front and a few of them are carrying costs during construction. But these are the things that have to be done to support the project that are outside of construction. And again, these are kind of today's real world numbers. So we have management, we have a developer fee in there, which is just to kind of cover the developer's efforts in putting the project together. Architectural design, civil design, geotechnical design, and borings, structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing design, permitting fees, cost of the land, construction interest during construction. It's actually a pretty big number that people often overlook. That's just what you pay while you're waiting for the thing to be completed. Financing costs, legal costs, marketing costs, environmental costs, such as phase 1, phase 2, possibly some cleanup, any hazardous material, lead, asbestos, that kind of stuff. That number can vary wildly. That's kind of just a guess at kind of a mid-range. Construction engineering and a contingency. So you can see on this $5 million project, over $1 million of that is just soft costs that aren't really part of the actual construction. So all of that kind of boils back down to the summary page. And what I kind of wanted to show is a few things, and we can, if people want to see other things changed, we can do that. But in here, one of the first things we can look at is the rate. We used to be, we financed projects many times in the threes, in the mid threes, from 2016 through probably late 2020. And you can see that changing that from a 5% to a 3.5% actually just put this project into a kind of a viable zone from 4%, which would have been, if this isn't working, to being a viable project. So it literally just doubled the net income by just changing the loan rate, which was a change that's happened. Today, if we were to finance right now, we'd be around 6.3%. And if we plug that in, you see we're just about break even. So it's dramatic, and we've looked at a lot of different ways, but that rate needs to come down. So I'm going to put this back at 5 just so the numbers aren't as scary. And then the other thing that changes things a lot is if we go back to project construction costs and we're at that 240, now let's put in 275, and we'll go back to the summary page. And you can see again that pretty much wipes it to a break even, which means that the project is nowhere near working. So what is the other variable? The other variable, for the most part, that we can control is the rents. Right now, you'll see I had 5 units at 1,600, 5 at 18 something, 5 at 2,000, and 5 at 3,000. Now, believe it or not, because these numbers 3 years ago would have seemed really, really high, but several of these numbers are below market rate on here today. So that's actually another thing that's been hard to, just like the construction costs, the rental rates, market rents, are hard to really keep up with and grasp. But there is only so much people can afford. So at some point you hit numbers that are going to be too much. But if we bump these all up to 100% AMI, which is right around 2,000, a little over 2,000 for a 1-bedroom and about 2,500 for a 2-bedroom. Well, it helps some, but not a ton. And then, of course, from there, it's even harder. So if you wanted to really look at the difference between market rate and affordability, I mean, this is an extreme case because you likely you would never have an all 60% AMI building without incentives. But just to kind of see the difference, we go back here to the summary. We have a $15,000 net income with that 100% AMI on this project. And let's just switch it to the 60% just to see what that delta is. So that's about $1,200 for a 1-bedroom and $1,500 for a 2-bedroom. That's a $200,000
Negative 60.
annual difference. Now again, it's an all 60% building is not common. That would be something with a lot of incentives, but you can see pretty quickly that it costs a fair bit to have units that meet the pretty strict affordability requirements. So what we're doing today is we're trying to get creative and hoping that rates come down. I don't think construction costs are going to come down substantially anytime soon. There's just enough backlog and the cost of materials kind of are what they are that we just don't see movement in that anytime soon. So we hope rates come down. That will help a lot, as we talked about. The other thing we're looking at, which is kind of a bummer, but it's the reality, is reducing unit sizes. So you can see that in this rental income, we're talking about a 1-bedroom, but we're not really necessarily talking about the square footage. So what if that's 100 square feet or even 550? The construction costs are not going to change that much. They're going to be pretty similar. And that's going to help the pro forma. So that's another variable which actually can help, but it's still really challenging. And all it's doing is keeping the cost the same, but it's driving the unit size down smaller and smaller and smaller, which may be okay for some people, but for families and things like that, it's really challenging. So that's my my quick overview of this pro forma, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So how much of your interest is tied up because of the permitting process?
Like how much of the project costs, or
Yeah, if you could get your permits 1 year faster, how much would it save?
that's an interesting question. I think it would depend on which permits we're talking about. I'm fortunate to have been working in a lot of areas that have designated downtowns and neighborhood development areas. And the Act 250 and municipal project process is pretty reasonable. So for those areas, permitting is not, the cost is a challenge, but the permitting piece is not our biggest hurdle. In areas where we can't streamline Act 250 is definitely a challenge. And then coupling that, if the municipality has, strict requirements, specifically in Williston, I've not done a project in Williston. So, I know there's some challenges with getting, rights to the units, development rights. So time definitely matters, but, it's hard to put an exact number on that.
Now, we have one housing project here in town that's been 4 years in the process, waiting for permits and then sewer allocation. I'm curious as to how much that has cost the developer.
Yeah, well, that's huge. And what's the worst about something like that is you've gone from an area when you can maybe build for $150 a square foot to, $270 a square foot. So just that alone is a massive impact. Yeah.
Mhm.
Looks like Lisa has her hand up.
Lisa?
Thank you. How about the impact of donated land? If a town had a piece parcel.
Yeah, well, that would be, that would be huge. As you saw in the project soft costs, out of this $1 million, 450,000 was allocated to land. So today, you know, it's not uncommon to be around 20 plus $1,000 per unit for land. So, you know, obviously that would help a lot. That's half your soft costs alone.
And then
What
how
else?
about, sorry, how about density bonuses, you know, going higher?
So yeah, that is that can help. As I mentioned, you probably noticed there's a lot of 4-story buildings out there. You go higher than 4 and the fire code changes dramatically. And you're basically going to end up with at least one floor of steel and concrete before you put those next 4. So 4-story buildings are much more cost efficient than 5-story buildings. And again, they're even more cost efficient than 6-story. Once you hit 6, the whole building's going to be steel and concrete. So, you know, going from say 2 stories to 4 would be great. I would say from a developer's perspective, we love flexibility. So we would say it's great to have the ability to go higher. But in most cases, if you're going higher than 4 stories, then your costs to build are going to go up too. So you're going to be dealing with kind of a double-edged sword there. But what impacts things, what can be a huge impact in a positive way, is reduced parking requirements. I don't know how many times we've designed a project where, you know, it's come down to like 5 parking spaces, that if we could just get rid of those 5 spaces, we still end up with like, say, 0.9 spaces per unit, but say we need a little over 1, and it's just making the project super challenging. If a developer has, you know, most developers, I can't speak for everyone, but most of us are going to be pretty careful, and the banks and the lenders, everybody's going to be pretty careful not to build a project that's not going to work. So if we have some flexibility with parking, that can be huge. That could actually make or break. Those 5 spaces could make or break a project. So lately I've been a huge advocate, and I'm seeing it happen in Chittenden County, which is extremely exciting, but a huge advocate for reducing the parking requirements, especially when we're in the climate that we're in. You know, if it was super cheap to build and it was no big deal, then sure, then let's build structured parking under buildings. But right now, especially, eliminating parking can be a super helpful incentive.
What are some other incentives that would help you decide to build in Williston? Or
I think, you know, for Williston, I'm still kind of navigating the water sewer piece. That sounds like that's going to be a bit challenging. So I'm not sure exactly how that works and if any progress can be made there. I think, you know, one of the things, you know, that I've been helping or lending some data to the city of Winooski and the city of Burlington as well. And I'm super appreciative that you folks had me on here. But when we can align incentives with real world costs, like we really can get stuff done. But you know, a lot of times those incentives may not be quite what a housing commission would like to see, but they may be kind of the sweet spot, the balance of what can be done. So one of those areas is affordability requirements that are truly doable. So, you know, 20% AMI at 60%, or 20% of your building at 60% AMI is probably not doable without, you know, lots of resources that are super scarce right now. But, you know, could you do 1 unit at 60%? Could you do a few percent of the building at 60% and maybe a few more at 80? Yeah, you probably could do that and really, you know, and really get more projects off the ground. So that's another area, you know, affordability requirements that really meet, you know, those guidelines, or meet those, you know, meet that balance. You know, parking is the other big one. I don't know density. I mean, I'm now seeing most places shift their more development friendly areas to form-based code, and most form-based code does not have a density limit. So not sure exactly how Williston lands on that right now, but reducing density in areas that you want to see multifamily housing is huge. Trying to think what else. I mean, there's those are the main tools, that I
Yeah,
can think of.
and just to answer that question, so we don't have density restrictions within the form-based code district.
Yeah,
So there's.
which is great. Yeah. Yeah, and from what I've seen, the form-based code it really does take out a lot of the challenges that this, the older codes used to have. So that's already a good step in the right direction. And then I think reducing parking. The other thing is like the process as was brought up, like how long does it take to get a project done? If you're going into a municipality where they have a kind of a track record of helping to get projects through and just being supportive of projects, and that reputation, I think you're going to gain more interest with developers or housing folks that come into the area and want to put a project together. So just having a process that's predictable, and works well and is fairly streamlined. I think you should be able to get a project fully permitted in less than 6 months, maybe sooner if you have everything in place, and that does help a lot. Again, it's hard to put an exact dollar figure, but I think it's just going to bring more people to the table, get more projects across the finish line.
Do we have a minimum building height in the form-based code?
Different places.
Yeah, right. So in some areas, it's only 2 stories, but in other areas, it's 3.
We don't ever require 6.
No. No. Yeah, and as far as like permitting process, through amendments that were made last October, plus the form-based code. Now, like, projects in the form-based code are pretty streamlined, like we can permit those in, 6 months or less. And then projects, that either, are adaptive reuse, or very small projects, or projects that meet inclusionary zoning requirements don't have to go through growth management. So that like takes a whole year out of the process. It's growth management was really sort of like, creating this kind of bottleneck on a lot of projects. That's why that project that you mentioned, Charlie, that went through under the old rules and had to go to growth management 4 different times to get all of the allocation for all of the units that he was proposing. But we've, what we're hoping is that, like, great majority of projects are gonna fall sort of outside the growth management criteria, or will be either inclusionary or adaptive reuse projects, converting commercial into residential units. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, from what I've been leafing through with the Williston form-based code, there's a lot of steps that have been taken that help with a lot of this stuff, which is really good to see, because not all towns and cities have adapted, to some of this new stuff. And I think the more of that can be done, the better. If there's other districts or just other parts of the town that that can be extended to that aren't already, that's also huge. I don't know if people have been following Burlington's neighborhood code. It's a little different because Williston's not quite as dense, obviously, as Burlington, but we're not small infill developers, so I don't know if our structure would work. But I think for a lot of developers and maybe even homeowners, there's an opportunity, I think, to build, small infill. And I think in an area, again, I don't know how exactly it would work in Williston, but an area like Burlington or Winooski, and maybe parts of Williston, could really benefit from a residential district having some, well-planned additional density with some infill. So that's another area, I think, with today's construction costs that it may be viable to get projects off the ground.
Mm-hmm. And now, of course, with the passage of the Homes Act, we're now required to have like a 5 unit per acre density, which is a step forward in the right direction anyway. Yeah,
Yeah,
What parts of town
definitely.
does that apply in?
that's in areas that are,
Water and sewer.
served by water and sewer. So that would be the residential zoning district and, village, and, of course, Taft Corners. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Very small portions of the ARZD and the gateway districts as well.
Mountain View Road.
The south side of Mountain View Road. Yeah.
Well, if we're all set with this spreadsheet, I had one other document I just wanted to quickly share that I can send out to everyone. If we're okay to move on from this.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is a document that came out of the city of Winooski's housing director. And it's really helpful. Myself, along with some other housing folks, put together some information, and with Jasmine, this was put together, and it has a lot of really great information about just some of these costs that we've talked about. One of them, with Winooski, is we're trying to see if we can lower parking costs or lower parking requirements. So there's some cost data for structured parking in here. This is kind of gathered from some projects, which is helpful because I think it sheds some light on the very expensive costs of building structured parking. The other thing that's really interesting in here is I don't think I hear this as much in Williston about 3-bedroom units, but it's a big push in Winooski to try to get more 3-bedroom housing, rental housing. But there's a huge challenge with that. And this kind of talks through why that's so challenging. And I'll just kind of quickly show you, the big difference is that down here in this right corner, you see 2 green bays and 2 blue bays. That's each of those is a separate unit. So each of these 1-bedroom units has 2 bays, a bay for living, kitchen and living, and a bay for bedroom and bathroom. So this is a mock building with 8 units on each floor. If you scroll down, you'll see this next one shows what a 2-bedroom takes up for bays. A 2-bedroom takes up 3 bays, of course, because you need a window for your bedroom, and you need a whole bay basically for that. And then this figure 3 shows what it takes to build a 3-bedroom unit. It actually takes all that square footage. So without kind of going into all the numbers in here, you quickly see that a 3-bedroom unit is going to cost the same to build as 2 1-bedroom units. And thus, if you're looking at a pro forma, your rents would need to be equivalent to make sense. So that's an interesting thing there. The other thing she does a nice job on this is putting together kind of an analysis on the cost of affordability and what the delta is. She actually gets real kind of annualized numbers of annual additional costs. This is what are the annual additional costs for I think it's 3-bedroom 80% AMI instead of a 1-bedroom at 80% AMI per year. It's a $7,000 cost difference. She has a bunch of these examples, so you can actually take these and kind of play around with like what are these affordability levels, like what are they actually costing a project. It's pretty helpful. And I can forward this. This is right from Winooski's Joint Housing Planning Commission that happened last month. So it's pretty informative. Yeah, and you can see looking at some of these worst case scenarios, how much it adds up over time on these projects.
And Nate, that would be
Yes.
great to share for CCRPC as well. I think that's really helpful and helps us have conversations with folks who are thinking about inclusionary zoning or thinking about how to get those housing types built.
Yeah,
And we are
absolutely.
trying to work on sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say I can absolutely send that out.
Yeah, that'd be great. It looks really, really helpful.
Yeah, because this is also a document that's got some draft IZ code for Winooski coming out.
Huh. Cool.
So that's all I had to share. I don't know if there's any further questions or anything.
I had a question for Melinda. What is the parking ruling in the new form-based area?
Um.
Zoning quiz.
Yeah, I think it is 1.5 spaces per dwelling. I believe that's what it is. But also with passage of the Home Act, I think their maximum or their maximum requirement is 1 per dwelling. Now this is where I get confused. In areas served by water and sewer and where you are less than 1/4 mile from public parking. Do I have that right? And then,
That sounds right, Melinda.
yeah. And then I think they said you can go up to 1.5 spaces if you're more than 1/4 mile from a public municipal parking, whatever that means. So, yeah,
From municipal parking or from municipal transportation?
parking. Yeah. Um,
Well, and I guess another question for Nathan is, do you ever partner with the Champlain Housing Trust or Habitat or anything like that?
We have not to date. We have looked at a lot of different ways to, partner with VHFA. We have done some co-developments in Winooski with Summit Properties where we work directly on tax credit projects. But we're always looking for other opportunities, and I think that's another area where nonprofits can partner with market rate developers and try to join forces. I do think that's a good area to look at. But again, I think that we're low on resources because they're not going nearly as far as they used to with the additional costs. So that's another bottleneck, is just the additional funding.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Anyone else have any other questions or anything else that you'd like to hear from Nathan to better understand? And it's pretty clear the costs of trying to get people into developments is dynamic at this point. It's clear that you can't just say this is what it costs, what it will cost a year from now.
Darren has a question.
Darren?
Yeah, part question, part statement, but Nate, just based on your review of that pro forma, if the town of Williston has this housing trust fund, and one of the other items of discussion tonight is to figure out how to prioritize the use of that. If you were a developer and you had access to some amount of money, we're talking, in the thousands and maybe 10,000, it sounds like the best use of that would be to try to reduce the permitting, develop, and soft costs to get the best return for you to be able to make more affordable units, and particularly that acquisition of land and donation of land was a big one for you. Are there any other places where municipal funding could help bring your project costs down beyond simple $20,000 in means that cost is down for you and you can make a unit $20,000 cheaper somehow?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I think it's it's hard because most of the fees are probably necessary. Obviously, lower impact fees would help across the board, lower permit fees, but kind of looking at where that money goes and what it does. I'm not sure if there's a way to make that work. You know, and depending on how the housing trust is funded, I do think if there is enough money and there's a way to generate those funds, if that can actually offset some of the affordability, you know, maybe where it's like 50% comes from the developer on, say there's an affordability requirement, 50% is funded by the developer, 50% comes from the housing trust fund or something like that. I mean, that would be a really helpful tool if there's enough money to do an incentive like that.
And when you talk about that, you're thinking a long-term, you know, the operating cost of that unit being more affordable would be split between the developer and the fund, or are you thinking the initial capital one-time cost?
It could be done in a one-time cost,
Okay.
and just kind of a number that just helps to bridge that gap.
Yep.
You know, sometimes it doesn't take, especially if the affordability requirements aren't super burdensome, then we can really get we could really get some affordable units in there if there's maybe a little bit of money to, especially if you're looking at you know, 60%, you know, anything below 80% is pretty tough.
So
Mhm.
flexibility and a little bit of incentive to sweeten the pot on making those numbers work on the affordable units. Sounds like that would be helpful.
Yep.
Does it hurt you if those affordable units then have perpetual affordability clauses in them?
Well, I mean, the longer term it is, the more it impacts a project, but anything, you know, anything over 20 years, we kind of just think of as perpetual anyways. So again, I think it's all a matter of, do the numbers work? You know, and if they work short term, they should work long term, but you know, the more flexibility, obviously, the better it for the bottom line. That is true.
Have you ever done community development block grants for your projects?
We have not. Trying to think. We've looked at a lot of those, you know, that we've looked at that grant and also a few others. Trying to think of the other one, the one where the sales tax, I think it's sales tax reallocation. We've looked at a couple. There are a lot of hurdles to those grants, but sometimes they really can, for the right project, they can really work well. We've been doing a lot of projects with some brownfields issues, some contamination issues, and we've you know, fortunately had some good luck with working with the CCRPC and DEC on those types of projects. That's huge. I mean, I think you know, some of you might be aware, Darren's I'm sure aware, but our City West project in Burlington, it was a lot of work to figure out how to handle that site, but once we did, we were able to get, you know, 48 units on a previously pretty blighted property. So you know, though that support is great for sites that have that issue. I mean, I think if there's a site in a municipality where people would love to see housing and it's a known site with maybe some history that's not great or some contamination, like, there are ways to get those projects off the ground, so those don't have to be overlooked.
Mhm.
Do you do much redevelopment of existing buildings?
I haven't done much, no, mostly it's brand new construction.
It's a lot easier, I think, my experience.
Yeah, well, and right now with costs the way they are, you know, you're rarely gonna renovate something any cheaper than building new, if it needed a lot of work. So there's that challenge too. But
Yeah. Any other questions, comments? Yeah, I really appreciate you coming out and sharing all of this with us, Nathan. I think for me, it's been very helpful. I hope other people on the committee feel the same way.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks for inviting me out.
Mhm.
Take care.
See you, Nate.
Yep, you too. Bye.
See you. All right.
So can you bring up what our charge from the committee, from the select board was for this committee to to remind us where it is that we're heading.
Yeah. Having problems with screen sharing. Okay.
Does anybody, before we move on, does anybody, now that Nathan has left, anyone have any comments on the things that he's told us that you'd like to share or thoughts?
This is a pretty
Okay.
tough problem we're working on here, obviously.
Yeah.
I think you're right, Lisa.
Yeah, that makes sense, huh?
So here is what we have been charged with doing.
Right, so basically, right up front is making recommendations for use of the housing trust fund, so that's kind of like what,
That's the biggest one.
that's a big one, yeah,
Yeah,
kind of this one that, you know, you can't monitor program activities until the program is implemented, right?
yes. It isn't, does it still just have $50,000 in it, or?
Now, well, it has $60,000, but will have an additional 49,000 at some point. It's probably gonna come in dribs and drabs.
Oh, it was in the budget, yeah, cause I kept forgetting to look.
It's not in the
this year's.
budget, no,
No,
but
it's-
it was, a payment in lieu from a development project that decided to go from affordable to all market rate,
I think, okay.
so.
Can I,
So,
So be.
yeah,
can I jump
Lisa,
in? Yeah, can I jump in with a comment since we kind of went down that road? Yeah,
Yeah.
I am on the DRB and it's a 15-unit project and it's $49,000 that they would pay, payment in lieu that would go to this fund. But one thing that's come up for me is a couple of neighbors have said, oh, you know, we set up all this, the town set up all this thing for affordable housing, and now we have developers going around it. So I think it's important messaging on our part to say that, you know, the money comes to this trust fund. And in fact, I think in here it says that we should be looking at housing, you know, say below the 80% line or something like that. There's sort of different types of housing. The affordable housing that comes through the change in the zoning rules is either 80% or 100%. But my argument to these folks was that our housing needs are much more than that. Certainly, you know, Marla's son and other folks like that are retail workers. So, you know, I think we have a communication thing in the town.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, a lot of misinformation going around on it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And also, I think it would be helpful if I periodically shared with the committee, and I've been meaning to do this, but, haven't yet, just how many inclusionary projects are coming in, because quite a few are, particularly in, the form-based code district, but also in other areas of town, there are inclusionary projects coming in, so I think that, and, you know, our hope in drafting the inclusionary zoning provisions is that, you know, most projects would be inclusionary. There would be a few that would opt out for one reason or another. In this case, it was a relatively small development, 14 houses, and it just wasn't economically feasible for them to, you know, to include 3 affordable homes in that. You know, the site already has a lot of challenges, and I actually brought his attention to Habitat for Humanity. He said he had already talked to David, but, you know, for whatever reasons, it wasn't gonna pan out. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, I think it does offer some flexibility to certain developers. You know, that project's gonna move forward and build some houses. And there was sort of a point at which, you know, he wasn't sure whether he was gonna move forward. He was thinking about just selling the land to somebody else, so. You know, I don't know.
I know that the last time that we had a housing committee that looked at what the town could do and recommended this housing trust fund, that the discussion quickly came to being, how can we get housing for people that are at or below 80% of the median income? And it was an interesting meeting because somebody said, at the median income or below, and everybody else on the committee jumped up and down and said, no, median income is not low income. You have a comment, Darren?
Yeah, sorry, I was just gonna go back to what Melinda was saying, and Lisa referenced this too, that having that payment in lieu is important because that project, that 15 unit project probably wouldn't have happened at all otherwise, but now you get the benefit of having the 15 units that are at that above market rate, at or above market rate, but you also get the funding to do something creative with your housing trust fund that they can fill other needs that the town has. So I think that's an important part of your messaging as well. And when I was talking with Melinda and Charlie before this meeting, I was suggesting that when you look at that 4.1 objective that she has on the screen, that looking at the uses of the fund that fill needs that other projects can't is, I think, your best bet in terms of making that the most useful.
Yeah, and to your point, Charlie, when I was watching these videos, this afternoon, one of the things that they talked about was to make inclusionary zoning really, effective, to consider having, deeper affordability standards, but fewer units.
Yeah.
And that was, easier for them for developers to manage, and it would also help people at even lower, lower.
Isn't that what
incomes.
our inclusionary says is 10% at
10%
60%?
at 80%.
Yeah,
80%,
Yeah,
okay.
and
Oh, at 80?
Right,
It's just
and
80.
so-
It's not, okay, because we
Right.
should really probably consider going to 60 at some point.
perhaps, yeah,
Oh,
and I
yes,
think,
remember.
I
Some
think
of them.
we didn't want to. We wanted to start out gradually, we didn't wanna set the requirements right off the bat as being. We wanted to sort of be a little bit gentle and then see how it goes, and if we're getting like a ton of projects that like 80 AMI, and it's seeming to be pretty doable, then yeah, we absolutely can come in and, another couple years or whatever and adjust those targets, if we think that's, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
Darren mentioned that too, that even having, if you can break it down and have one at 60.
Yeah,
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 that's right.
and 80.
Yep,
yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
Would it be helpful? Yeah, would it be helpful to look at, what's in the housing trust fund ordinance? For starters, or how do you wanna?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. All right, so this is the ordinance. And, yeah, so basically, it goes through the purpose,
Long term.
yeah,
Grants or loans.
long-term affordable housing for very low and low-income households.
Very low and low.
Yeah,
Yeah, did they provide guidance? Is that 60% or
yeah,
what does low mean in their thoughts?
yeah. Let me look,
No more
okay,
than
here it
80.
is. So low income is 80% median, very low income is no more than 50% of median income. And then basically that's,
Oh, that's 50 to 80, sort of very low.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's,
right,
yeah.
so it's like, yeah, the 50 to 80 is low income, and then the below 50 is very low income.
Yeah.
And So beyond that, you know, there's a little bit of guidance, but there's not, I mean, there's a framework here. You know, so established a general purpose, right, to provide funding for low and very low income. And then, you know, gives grants or loans and, you know, for either for, affordable, perpetually affordable or, let's see, oh yeah, okay, here it is. So either the perpetual affordability or a term of between 10 to 40 years with, you know, provided that it's a loan that's repaid to the housing trust fund. So that's kind of,
So they kind of given us the ground rules, so.
kind of, yeah.
Fairly narrow band that we need to flesh out with what we think the policy ought to look like.
It did say something about, could you scroll back up to the very beginning? It's one of the things that I thought was interesting, was about retention of, just gonna say something about that. Yeah, promotion, retention and creation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, cause I hear in my work that, you know, we would save so much money. I mean, as a society, if we helped some people actually stay in their housing, because it costs so much more once they're out, you know, out and on the street or couch surfing or living in their cars or whatever they do. Whereas, you know, it's just small amounts of money sometimes can really help people retain their housing until they get on better financial footing.
Yeah, right,
That's a lot
so.
of what the CDO, is doing,
Mhm.
getting people in, retaining.
Yeah, but they always need, you know, funds, though. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't wanna have to administer it, cause
The state's putting a lot of money into that, yeah.
Oh, really? To retention? Oh, okay.
That's a-
So this talks about organizations or projects that promote, retain, or create. So I'm very familiar with Habitat for Humanity. Are there other, and Champlain Housing Trust? Are there other organizations that come into that category?
Well, I mean, any development that would fall under the inclusionary zoning now, right? Would it, cause there would be some,
I wouldn't think a
Very low
builder would
load.
be an organization.
Well, would it fit, I mean, somewhere it also said individual.
Or projects.
But yeah, it's
Yeah,
not
or
a project,
projects,
so.
yeah.
It could
So
be an
so that-
individual, so that could be an
Yeah.
ADU even.
Mhm.
yeah.
Something
I
else
mean,
you consider to meet that requirement or that, you know, target is some sort of supportive housing like what Marla is working on. Because those can count as low income, even if the funding is going towards something that's not directly supporting the housing. It could be, you know, just housing for those with disabilities, housing for those who are experiencing homelessness, things along those lines, or those fleeing domestic violence, all sorts of different options for providing that affordability for a group that may also experience, you know, have a low income, be considered a low income household.
Mhm.
Item 3 is specifically nonprofit organizations or corporations that whose purpose is to create or preserve housing.
Right, so like one way that, or one way you might wanna use the funds is just say, okay, we're gonna contribute, X amount of dollars to CHT this
Mhm.
year or
Do
whatever,
what?
to CHT,
Champlain.
for example,
Mhm.
you know.
So that would be that's a capacity grant, that's what it's.
Right, so it's like, that would be a decision, you know, we don't know if they're doing any projects in Williston, but we wanna support their work because they, you know, cause we partner with them and they're, you know, they're doing great work and they're building affordable housing, so that would be sort of like a more, you know, sort of general use of the funds, no guarantee that it would result in anything being built in Williston, but, you know.
So
I guess I have the impression that our charge is to increase affordable housing in Williston, not just generally throughout the area.
Mhm.
that seems to be how your fund is set up, and that's how most municipal funds are set up. One of the challenges that comes with that is that for nonprofits like Champlain Housing Trust, their projects are very opportunistic. They don't necessarily think, all right, we're going to do 3 projects in Burlington and 1 project in Williston and 1 project in Essex, and everyone's going to get their share. It's really, when does the property come up? When do we get the funds? How do we make it all work? So even though it makes sense that Williston funds, Williston tax dollars are going to funding housing in Williston, just keep in mind that it doesn't always play out that way for the nonprofits.
Mhm.
And eventually there might be a project that comes around to Williston. You might just not see it right away. And that
Yeah.
some people who are living in Williston, or sorry, working in Williston might live in other communities that are utilizing that housing provided by CHT or another nonprofit.
Mhm.
Well, I still am of the opinion that if we read the whole intent of the first line, it would say for the creation and retention of long-term affordable housing in Williston, to distribute grants for the purpose that promote or retain affordable housing in Williston. I know that they didn't write that in, but I suspect that they had that in mind when they passed it.
Mhm.
You were on the board when they passed it, right? No, that was after you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
I
So
definitely,
I guess
I
my thinking
definitely
is,
agree with you.
Yeah, yeah.
it's my thinking that if we were going to support a Habitat for Humanity or Champlain Housing Trust or another agency like that, that it would be specific to projects in Williston.
Mhm. So it seems like just the capacity grants is not gonna be a high priority, just distributing capacity grants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like the highest priority is to get some affordable housing built.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would it be helpful, I do have this Mentimeter poll, would it be helpful to at least talk through the choices of, possible uses of the fund?
Sure.
Yeah, so I should bring,
Is that what Lisa's,
yeah, sort of, but
Yeah.
I've just kind of made it bigger,
okay, yeah, cause I've been looking at that.
So, this was actually intended to be, and we can do this, if you want, like late, after you just go through and talk about it, we can run through this poll if you have phones or devices on you or whatever, or just by, I don't know, raise of hands or whatever. But yeah, that was the intention, was just get a kind of a feeling for where your priorities were at, sort of your collective priorities,
Oh, from us.
from you, yeah.
Oh, I see, okay.
But let me see, maybe see if I can make this bigger. If, or not.
Yeah,
You can see
I
it.
mean, it's big enough.
Yeah, so one possibility would be, as Debbie just mentioned, just like homelessness prevention, trying to keep people in their homes, so. Granting or just granting, loaning people money so that. So that they can make rent, for this month or. Something, make a security deposit, if they have an apartment, they can't afford a security first and last month rent, something like that. I don't know, do you have other?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what we
Yeah.
aim for,
Maybe also cover utilities for a month when they're running short. There are state programs for that, but the idea would be low barrier resources and low barrier funding, just so someone could be like, I don't have time to walk through 5 different applications through 3 programs. I just need to make rent this month.
Yeah, I mean, one of my takeaways from when we talked with the other housing committees is that they had set up programs, like assistance with the down payment and that kind of thing that seem to be duplicated by other folks. And I think it's just since we're new and, I mean, I guess I'll just say it out. I mean, I like the idea of helping construct an ADU in Williston. So, you know, when I looked at everything, what we heard today is that new housing is really, really expensive. Infilling might be a less expensive way. But the other way I look at this, you know, I used to run a company and we would talk about different problems. And this analogy I bring up is apparently there's people in the world that can only swim in swimming pools. Like if they have to go to the ocean, they can't swim in the ocean. So, you know, they can only swim when they can sort of see the bottom in a well-defined problem. But a lot of problems in the world, like this one, you know, like with everything we heard today, is ocean swimming. Like there is no like, here's 25 steps to affordable housing in your town. So when you're ocean swimming, all you can do is sort of pick the next point and then assess. You know, you swim towards a spot and then you pick your next point. So I think it'd be great if we had an early win, if we could start to say, yeah, this is a complex problem, but we did something here in Williston. We did something really concrete. So getting one ADU across the line to me would be something where we could start to communicate well with the community.
What would be something in Williston that, I mean, do we have a lot of homelessness prevention needs in Williston or accessibility modifications, or like which one of those is something that we need, there's a need for it in Williston?
And how would ADUs help meet that need?
Well, or how would any of them?
Yeah, any of those
Yeah,
points.
it's sort of which
Yeah.
ones are specific.
I believe just through, I don't know, just from what I've heard anecdotally from, especially from, Crystal Lee McSweeney, is that there are a lot of housing insecure people. in
Yeah,
Williston.
I think that's so true all across the state. And well, so another way I think, I mean, I appreciate where the analogies you used, Lisa, but I think another way to look at it too is how can we get more for more impact for a smaller investment, you know, also. So, you know, for instance, I mean, you know, ADUs, I mean, since I've been doing a lot of research and stuff, it's like one ADU will like house maybe like one person's, you know, mother-in-law, or what, you know, it doesn't have a lot of impact across, you know, multiple people. You know, $200 or $500 per, you know, 20 people for, you know, each month out of the year. It wouldn't amount to a lot of money, but it would help a lot, you know, it would help more people, you know, keep them from falling into homelessness. So, yeah, anyway, I think that's another way to look at it too.
Yeah, you know, I think that's a really good point. And actually, you know, I guess it goes back to the charge. Are we focused on increasing the stock of affordable housing, or yeah, or where we should focus? I mean, your point's very well taken, but a lot of only the ADU option here would actually increase the stock. Although, you know, to your point, it's small. It would be a small victory.
Let me show the other choices, because there's
Yeah.
another whole.
Yeah, there are others, yeah.
So, yeah, so these are like more the creation of affordable homes, or, you know, this is more the focus of this slide. And then I think,
And the last one, there's subsidies of affordable units. We've said that
Yeah.
if a homeowner, if a developer could have 10% of their units available perpetually at 80% or below, and they're saying, well, I don't know if I can do that. If we could do something to help them be able to meet that, it could really increase our stock with a fairly minimum impact on us, but a major impact on the stock of affordable housing in the town.
Well, that's when he was talking about that, Darren, what's his name? Nathan. To offset the affordability,
Yeah,
Yeah.
50% funded by the developer, 50% by the trust fund, a one-time cost to bridge the gap.
Yeah,
Mhm.
So how much would that be?
it's a good question.
I mean, is he talking
But
50%
Need to
of
look
the
at his
total
pro
cost?
It's pro forma again, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, we saw the costs of big building development, the cost of the development, up there on the, next door to the horse farm. And next
Yeah.
door to Windswept is all two-family houses, and the costing for that is, you don't have all the public space that you need to pay for in building townhouses that you do in building apartment houses. So that the same $270 a square foot gets more house there than it does in an apartment house if it's the same cost. Now, if we want to say to that developer, he's building 115 units, that if 12 of them are affordable at 80%, then he doesn't have to pay a big cost to the town. What if we had money that we could help him do that?
Mhm. Yes.
So you're saying it's less expensive to build it on Old Stage Road?
It's, land is more expensive, but building is less expensive.
Even though he has to do all the roads and the sewer and everything?
yeah. Um,
I just wanted to share, going back to the question of what that cost difference might be. There's a new Homes for All design and do toolkit for small scale home builders, investors, and community leaders that the state just released as one of their programs. I gave Melinda, I messaged Melinda because I can only message her, but the webpage for this has some sample pro formas that you could look at that are probably
Okay.
pretty similar to what Nate shared, and you could figure out, and I'm happy to help with this, figure out what the rough, per unit cost split might be on getting that subsidized
and-
unit that otherwise would be market rate, or going from an
Yeah.
80% to a 60% AMI.
Yeah, but the other thing about the development like they're doing up there is that you get into the economics where family homes, 3-bedroom homes become affordable, where his description of trying to put 3 bedrooms in his apartment houses was really not viable. So it allows families as opposed to just
Well, Williston has 3 and 4 bedroom homes and we don't have
yeah.
the 1 and 2 bedroom.
Well, we have a lot of new multifamily housing.
But I think we should look at those resources maybe for the next meeting and look at, say we had $100,000, what would that look like in terms of subsidizing affordable units? If someone came in and said, we want to do market rates, and we said as the town, well, we can subsidize 3 units, or making numbers up, but what would it look like? So those pro formas that you just mentioned, I think could help us understand, if we're even in the ballpark on that. It's a really interesting idea, but I think we got to do a little math.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe there's, I'm going to suggest maybe looking at all these options that you might be interested in pursuing and saying, how much would $100,000 in the Housing Trust Fund make an impact? And maybe that'll help you choose a path, or maybe pick 1 or 2 things to focus on.
Yeah, I do think we're only talking about a couple of things probably.
Right.
I mean, I could probably, oops, bring that up right now and we can fiddle with it if we wanted to. So say we're
And
looking at
Melinda,
yeah,
I was just thinking we can definitely look at that. I'm kind of curious to look at it myself, but I'm wondering if one of the things that would help the committee, like Lisa said, for the next meeting is to lay out, okay, of all the options that you put on the Mentimeter, $100,000 in Housing Trust Fund equals how many units subsidized, how many units built, how many households did we prevent, for which did we prevent homelessness, something like that.
yeah. Yeah,
Well, or even like, let's just finish the slides and see which things we are considering.
yeah, so really it was just like these 2 slides, and then if there was any other ideas that people had, for the use of this. And I actually had one other idea. It's not very well formed, but maybe being able to partner with CHT to convert an already existing home into, like, basically have it be part of their shared equity portfolio. So like, I don't know, I have no idea how much money that would take to like, have them basically buy the land under a home and have it be, you know, a shared equity home that would be perpetually affordable, an existing home somewhere. But that was just one idea I had.
Of making an existing home into an affordable home.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Charlie, does
Um,
Habitat ever do that? If we found a big farmhouse that we wanted to turn into 4 units, does Habitat ever weigh in?
Yeah, we've done that.
You don't sound excited.
He doesn't like multiple units. He
Like-
wants everybody to own a home.
No, we had a lot in Essex Junction that it came with a garage barn as part of the building, and we built a 3-family house on the front. We converted the barn into a house on the back. So yes, it was, we have done that. And I think that the general attitude is, yeah, we'll look at anything to see what we can do to make truly affordable homes. The home ownership, it's always a home ownership model with Habitat.
Mhm.
One
know,
other
thing
idea
is-
in that vein, sorry, I'm a little
Go
bit
ahead.
delayed and missing the opportunity to jump in. Is reaching out to the community to ask if if someone's willing to either donate or sell at lower price to CHT or Habitat their home for the purpose of creating permanent affordability through shared equity. Sort of having, it's a little bit like a conservation easement or a
Yeah.
endowment planning or estate planning to say, we're gonna dedicate this to this purpose as a charity to build our legacy. That might be something that some folks would be interested in.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then maybe the fund could assist with, like, you know, legal costs or something like
Right,
that.
right.
Mhm.
Similarly to how, the ERF, is sometimes used.
Mhm.
And then as far as like ADUs, I guess I had a thought about ADUs that maybe the fund could be helpful in funding pre-development costs. So like, say, somebody just has a lot of challenges around, permitting and maybe
Septic.
septic, has to like redesign their septic.
Yeah, right.
Or, I don't know, just, yeah, those soft costs, that can, prevent somebody from developing.
And that whole idea of trying to figure out where a little bit of money is keeping people from being able to start, and how you find that and help with that is a hard one.
Mhm.
Well, and that was one of the things, they had the grants and it didn't seem
ACCD,
like they weren't used much.
huh,
Well, the VHIP program, they have these big, they have these big grants for
No,
ADUs.
one of the other people that came with Winooski or the Housing Trust Fund in.
Jericho, I think, had a couple of projects.
The
The Winooski Housing Trust Fund, one of their programs was,
Something like a 5,000 granted down
yeah,
payment or something,
okay, yeah. Oh, right, and then,
and they didn't use
I
it
don't-
much.
Sometimes people don't know about things,
Yeah, it was publicized too, they were actually working on
Yeah.
more.
I didn't include on here, and I meant to, down payment assistance.
Yeah, it looks like Charlotte has that too.
Yeah. Which actually could be. I mean, so like, what I could do is prepare, you know, say we have $100,000 in the fund and just say like, how many, households would this help in this area, this area, this area? And,
Where to
and,
get the most bang for the buck.
well, and it's not like, so the money doesn't have to be used for just one thing, right? So you could have different buckets, where you could have, you know,
Yeah,
whatever, if you were felt strongly about funding like 2 or 3 different, kinds of things, you could, you know, sort of
yeah,
decide how much of the fund you wanted to go to each thing, and then just kind of do it that way.
Yeah.
Well, I like projects too that align with the housing needs assessment, you know, in terms of these 7,000 retail workers that work in town and can't live here. So something that speaks to that. I mean, obviously we can't build 7,000 units, but you know, something that speaks to that because they certainly contribute to the town, you know, but can't live here. And then also the you know, the idea that we're mismatched in terms of household size and size of houses. A lot of people have bigger houses than they need.
Mm.
So anything that addresses the things that were in that report appeal to me as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Mhm.
well, and that could be, you know, if someone's, you know, my neighborhood, there's like a dozen people that are older couples who are staying in this house because they can't really afford to move anywhere nearby without, you know, costing the same. But if
Why would
we
I
build
wanna-
an
Why would I
ADU,
wanna move? I mean, just cleaning out the basement to move is.
well, but if you built an ADU and you moved into it, then that would leave a
Yeah, that's, yeah.
3-bedroom house or
Yeah, so-
4-bedroom house.
Yes.
Bill Skiff did.
Right,
A family.
yeah.
But yeah. Depends on what you.
And they may or may not need a subsidy from the Housing Trust Fund to do that ADU, but
Right,
if that, you know, it might be worth looking and, you know, talking to a couple of folks who maybe have done ADU projects in Williston to ask what worked, what didn't for you, or, you know, Melinda, I don't know if you get inquiries for ADUs that end up not going anywhere, if you can follow up on to see if the Housing Trust Fund would have bridged a gap.
Well, that, we were, I don't think you were on yet, because I was talking about my experience. I'm trying to
yeah,
build an ADU at my house, and I ran into, trouble around my septic, system. It really needs to be totally redesigned. And I'm not, you know, they said, but starting at $7,500, and then we have no idea how many thousands of dollars it might be, you know, on top of that. So cause I mean, I'd already gone and looked at, kind of, you know, one of those modular homes and, you know, gotten estimates on that. You know, I was like already, I was all ready to go, you know, and then that just ground the whole thing to a halt. So, yeah, so that's one experience.
Yes,
So
well,
it's,
and not an uncommon
maybe-
one. There's 3 houses on my street or on my road that are replacing their septic systems.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, my septic system is designed for the number of bedrooms in the house. The fact that we only use one of the 4 doesn't really affect that.
Right,
Well, that is one of our charges, is to some kind of educating or something.
oh, yeah,
So
just
that might be.
outreach and
Yeah.
education, yeah,
Mm.
right. Is there anything on this first screen that you would say, like, no, not interested in that at all, or not interested in that very much?
Well,
There are enough other weatherization programs that I
Yeah.
don't think that we should be involved in that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Go back up to the other,
yeah,
please.
and the capacity grants, I thought I heard sort of.
What was that?
The capacity
The
grants.
capacity grants were.
It didn't seem to fly for like CHT.
Yeah.
Maybe later.
Mhm.
Well,
They
and
just
on
got, what did they get, like $1 million or $10 million or something? So,
Right.
Well, and on the top one, purchase or preparation of land. Do we have any town land that we could be petitioning for?
Town land?
Yes.
I tried
No.
hard, 15 years ago to get town land for Habitat for Humanity and there's a piece of land behind the town hall that conceivably could put in a duplex, but there's a wetland back there. And now they've added the solar panels, so
Yeah,
I'm not sure that it's available at all
no.
anymore. There's a piece of land that is landlocked by the interstate that's totally unusable. Off of Oak Hill Road, immediately south of the interstate,
Yeah,
a Lion property. And if the town could find some way to require the folks on Partridge Hill to open up a road into that, it would be suitable. It's not town land, but because it's so completely unusable today, it would be inexpensive. In fact, Lion tried to sell it to us for almost nothing if we just couldn't figure out how to get into it. There are a couple lots in odd places that are too small to build on, or little pieces. Now that we have the Catamount land, maybe knocking a corner of that off, but it's not on the water and sewer, so the development costs are pretty high. for
we
that.
can't because it's
Yeah.
conserved,
Yeah.
so it's pretty much
Yeah.
can't do anything there. And that's the thing, the town has a lot of land, but
Conserved land.
it's all conserved,
Yeah.
so.
Well, what about the trooper barracks? I was wondering, we should get involved in that. I know there's already a conflict,
A line.
with the state, because they want it, because it's gonna be a lucrative property, but
Mhm.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we ought to be building housing wherever we can.
Right, so, yeah, that's, that.
But that's
um,
owned by the state, right?
It's owned by the state, and Eric, Wells, he sees the potential of it for housing or for a community center for other things. And that's why he, petitioned the state to, have Williston be able to, I guess Williston has to change its charter, and that has to be accepted by the state legislature in order for them to have first right of refusal for this piece of land. But yeah, I mean, so it's gotten that far, but, it doesn't give the town a lot of say at this point. It's just, sounds like the state may have other uses for that.
Yeah, they wanna sell it for a profit, is what I think they wanna do.
Yeah,
But yeah, I know, it's true. I mean, we have to get our legislators involved, in that,
Yeah.
too, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if you may feel like that's outside of our purview, but.
so I mean, there may, okay, so maybe not today, but there may in the future be a parcel of land that somebody wants to sell. Somebody approaches the town, hey, do you wanna buy this? And we think, oh yeah, well, maybe it has potential for housing. So there may be a point in the future when we could potentially fund the purchase or preparation of land for affordable housing. It's more of a theoretical possibility at this point, but it could be, so, or, municipally funded construction of housing.
Well, it's so
I mean-
little
I mean,
right
it's-
now, it
yeah.
wouldn't even be a drop in the
Right.
bucket for something
Yeah.
like that.
It just seems to me that there's a potential that the fourth one here, the subsidies for affordable
Yeah.
units, might be one of the places that we can get the most leverage.
I think, I agree with that, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe, projects that are inclusionary maybe could leverage like a lower affordability level
Right,
if
right.
we
Yeah, kick
provided
in
a
some.
subsidy.
Yeah.
Like, maybe 1 or 2 units at 60 or.
But I think that we should, that our charge is, the upper level of our charge is 80%. So that, anybody that's saying, well, I'll build the 15% at 100%, we're not going to be able to affect that. That's
Mhm.
outside of what the select board has asked us to do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Unless we said, would you build would you build like 15% at 80 if, we provided a subsidy or something?
Or the 10% that the town, or that the inclusionary zoning calls for. And that would say to the families, say to the developer, instead of giving us the however much it is per unit,
Yeah.
what if we gave you enough to make it affordable to you
Mhm.
to build the 10% at 80% affordability?
Mhm.
Yeah, we really need
Or
to
you
do the
could,
math,
yeah.
as we've said, to make sure that
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Right.
For the town.
No, we don't know what it means at all.
No, yeah,
Just
but
a
yeah,
concept, not a number.
Yeah.
yeah, I
And-
like the concept.
And also that, hopefully the fund will grow over time and maybe, if it could get some consistent funding, that would be even better, but
Mhm.
yeah, ideally you'd have more than 100,000 in the fund, but, so it sounds like you're really, kind of leaning on the subsidies in this one slide here.
I think that we ought to know what we can do with all of these, but yeah, I think that it's
Mhm.
likely that the subsidies are a place that we can get, because to the developer, they are getting something from us and not having to pay something to not build the affordable housing, so that it's, they're getting benefits, on both sides of that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, I like Darren's idea though about if we could price out some,
Yes.
like 4 or 5 ideas and then
Yeah.
sort of see,
Mm.
compare how much we would get for, a certain amount of money.
Could definitely do that. Yeah. And so, one other question that was in this survey was, should this fund be only for low and very low income, to support low and very low income housing? Or do you want it to also support moderate income housing? And I think from what I'm hearing that it's,
If we go back to what the select board asked us for,
yeah.
they were asking us for using it for less than
low.
80%, yeah.
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 Mm.
Which I would be arguing for vehemently if they hadn't said it. So
Yeah.
I don't have to make that
Yeah.
argument
Yeah,
because
I agree.
they sent us in that direction.
Now Scott's been sitting there silently.
Is he still sick?
Has any thoughts?
I see you still have your hand up.
Oh,
Oh, no, that's your cursor.
That's a
isn't it?
cursor, yeah.
Scott, you have anything to add right now?
Can't hear him,
He's not muted.
no. Audio issues.
Mhm.
So, so you're going to try to uh, give us some idea what $100,000 would do with the first, second, and fourth of this sheet and 3 that are on the next sheet.
Right, and that
Some of
was,
that wasn't that what he said was in that
What's that?
Homes for All?
What was that?
The Homes for All web pages had some of that.
yeah, we're gonna use
Yeah.
that spreadsheet and kind of
Yeah.
go to that
So
with the.
I am way more interested in home ownership than I am in rental housing. So
um,
when you're looking at it, I don't mind seeing numbers for both,
Yeah,
but I have a bias.
yeah,
I don't want anybody,
Yeah.
don't want anybody to think I'm not biased in
Yes,
this
I
thing.
know. Yeah, you've been very clear with that.
and do you wanna also look at, down payment assistance?
Yeah,
as another option?
I would like to
Yes.
see, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that's another thing that I think would, for very little money, might
Yeah.
help
I think
people out
the
a
only
lot.
thing we weren't interested in on this page was whether it's.
Whether-
Or is that right? Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, mhm.
Well, and
Yeah.
the down payment thing, the other town that had it hadn't had anyone take it up. I mean, I'm not sure that I believe that someone that's at the 60% of ADI in that market, there's nothing for them to buy. And, I think there's bigger problems than the down payment here. And also, Champlain Housing Trust. I mean, if there is this incredible deal that pops up, Champlain Housing Trust has those kind of things as well. So
Okay.
I might consider that a duplication of what other folks are doing.
I think maybe at the same time that we're looking at what we could do with our $100,000, maybe we need to also see what other things are available so that we're not just duplicating. I mean, the reason that we said we didn't want weatherization is because
Right.
Yeah,
there's already much of that. Maybe we need to have a sense of what other places are giving the same kind of help that we're talking to, so that we don't end up just duplicating something that already exists.
yeah. That's fair.
Yeah, I think the state is putting a lot into the preventing homelessness of the.
Well, the
legislature
state's doing
right
a
now.
really, really bad job. Let me tell you, that's a lot of my work.
Yeah.
And
That-
they're doing a terrible,
This-
terrible, terrible job.
That's where a little duplication.
Yeah, they need.
This legislative session,
Uh.
how they're looking at. They're putting, that's in.
I know they are, but it's still, they're doing a bad job, in my opinion.
As far as down
It's
payment
my-
assistance
my-
goes, though, I mean, yes, CHT does offer that in conjunction with its, shared equity program. But if you don't want to, like, their program is somewhat limited, like, if you wanna go outside of that, there may not be a lot out there for 60% AMI, but there are still, I mean, there are modular homes that you can get for, I just went to this workshop today that were, about, zero or net energy ready modular homes that were being sold for $160,000.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
With the land,
Yeah, no.
No, they,
So
you
they're
have the
200
land, yeah,
two
no,
hundred
it's,
and $60,000,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Well, and homes are selling in Williston Woods for $200,000 or less.
Yeah, right.
Hmm.
And Porterwood Trailer Park, they're less
Yeah,
than
lots of
that.
that.
Mm.
So, I mean, yeah, so we're really talking about, manufactured homes at that point, or
Yeah,
modular homes, but
right, yeah.
still.
Mhm.
The words are interesting because factories can build better houses than you can build on the site. There's a Habitat for Humanity site down in Charlotte that has 3 homes side by side, and one of them was built in a factory and brought in on a truck.
Yeah,
And you
Yeah.
can't tell the
Yeah.
difference among those 3 homes.
Hmm.
And so when we use the word factory built as a synonym for trailer house, it's not.
Mhm.
And modular homes can be really fine
Right,
homes. So
right,
Yeah.
again, our language is becoming fuzzy.
yeah,
We need to be careful with that.
yeah, sure.
Mm.
Darren?
Charlie, it's funny you say that because I was having a conversation with someone I'm working in Charlotte on their villages project, and that issue of modular home versus manufactured home was brought up, and the terminology is both fuzzy but also distinct. Anyway, what I
Yeah.
actually wanted to say is that going back to the duplication of programs, I think that's something we can probably add into this research on the bang for the buck, and it might also shed some light on, once you've decided what might be the biggest bang for the buck, there might be a question of how do you actually structure that program to be effective? What are the
Mhm.
considerations, and is the cost effectiveness affected by how well that program is structured? And that might be tossing us into the ocean swimming versus pool swimming, but
Yeah.
that's what I see as the next step following this analysis for you, is figure out what might be the most cost effective and what seems to feel right for the committee to pursue, and then we'll look into the details of how things would actually be structured and what we can learn from other programs to maybe improve upon, or how to avoid that duplication.
And I think that we should be doing something for now and not say, if we had $1 million, this is the way we would distribute. I think the
Right.
idea of looking at how to distribute $100,000 and documenting that and saying, this is where we think we should go now, knowing that that the committee will continue to exist and it can be revised in the future. It makes a lot of sense. So we can actually get something done if we
Mhm.
focus on what we have, not on what we wish we had.
And the analysis might be a good foundational document to say 5 years down the road, when you do have $100,000 or sorry, $200,000 instead of $100,000, maybe it's time to revisit another one of those options.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Okay, so do we know what we're gonna do next month from this discussion? Are we going to be able to look at these alternatives and see what impact we could have with them and what other people are doing that also impacts them?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Is there anything else that we need to do tonight?
Well,
I
I
did
was
want to
gonna,
mention, oh, go ahead.
say, Melinda, I hope that list includes your idea of taking a single family home and subdividing it and doing some kind of partnership.
Oh, you mean, the converting an existing home into an affordable one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Into
for the-
multiple affordable ones, because that really aligns with Williston, right? We have houses that are too big, older people that probably could use revenue to stay in some part of their house. I think it's a really good story.
Okay.
And
I
I was
don't-
going to
yeah.
suggest, oh, sorry,
Go
go ahead,
ahead.
Melinda.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say before we close, if you have any ideas, either now or afterwards, the things we should add to that list, let us know and we can relook into them.
Okay. So anything else, Lisa?
The only other thing as I look at the year, these have been great meetings and I feel like I'm learning so much. So Melinda and Darren, thanks for all the work you're doing here. The only thing I'm not sure that we have scheduled to make progress on is communication. Like part of our task is communicating with the town about what's going on. And I just mentioned that kind of gap in communication that was coming up. But I wonder if do we have discussions around a communication plan or surveys or something we want to do there?
Um,
Well, it might be helpful to kind of know what we're communicating, to really sort of figure out what we're gonna do with the housing fund, and then we can communicate that as well as, just the whole kind of anti-NIMBYism, sort of thing.
Yeah.
yeah,
I think we're a
Even
month or
just-
two away from telling people what we're doing.
Although, like she was saying, the fact that payment in lieu came in and what is it?
Yeah,
That it's gonna be going into the housing trust fund.
yeah.
Should we have like even just a blur?
They haven't come in yet.
Yeah, no, we could do a story
Well,
maybe when they do.
you
come
said
in.
there are more inclusionary projects.
yeah, so,
Yeah.
I could certainly put together some information for this committee on, what projects are coming down the pike that are inclusionary, that would be, I think, helpful for you to know. I know that there is a desire to kind of get a lot done as soon as possible, I can understand wanting to, get that communication piece out there. But I think that you're also just kind of starting and, meeting only once a month is challenging, and I think it'd be wise to kind of focus on this one piece of, working on your housing trust fund policy and getting that kind of buttoned up so that you can then start, and then once that's been
Go to the select board
vetted
with
by the
that.
select board, right,
Mhm.
then you can actually implement,
Yeah.
that, and I think that would be a big step
Mm.
Well,
forward.
then in the summer, we're supposed to be weighing in on the town plan future or something like that.
Yeah, but that'll be later this summer, so, yeah.
Darren, I see you have your hand up again.
Yeah, sorry. As you were talking about the town plan, I wanted to ask, I'm actually going to be on vacation for coming back from vacation for your May 1st meeting. And then Melinda, I'm wondering about the timing of the town plan and if you could flip the June and May agendas. which would also give us more time to do this analysis. But if not, that's okay. We can still work in the background, but that would be helpful for me if you could do that.
Sure, yeah, so we certainly could, next month, we could talk about the housing element of the plan, cause I think I'm kind of working on a draft right now, and, that'll give me impetus to get it done. So that the committee can weigh in on it.
And I'm just anticipating that some of the research on options for the housing trust fund, if we worked on it right away, could maybe get done before the next meeting, but I don't want to promise that without being able to deliver, and it might take more time to look into some of those details.
mhm. Yeah,
Well, our May plan was, discussion of the discussion that we've just talked about for the next two meetings, May and June.
mhm.
So it's hard to know how to swap them and how to have the one that's continued, instead of the first one doesn't, I don't know how to do that.
So,
Unless we bring the July meeting up into May.
well, we can't because Amy's not available on the first Wednesday, so I think it's fine if, you can talk about, town plan, housing element, and then
Yeah.
we continue this discussion the following month, unless there's something you think we can talk about without having that information that you're looking for, but I don't think that,
I don't think we can do it without the information.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we may be able to have that for May 1st, and I may or may not be able to attend. But I just wanted to throw that out there as an option to start with the housing element of the town plan and have the housing trust fund continued discussion be a smaller part of that, just in case we don't end up having enough material for you.
Yeah, I mean, and then the other option would be to have like, part of that meeting just discussing, if we weren't gonna discuss housing trust fund, to have part of that meeting discussing more like sort of outreach and messaging type of, focus. Which sort of ties in with the housing element of the town plan a little bit, but anyway.
Okay, we will work that out. Lisa, anything else? Darren, you're all set? Scott, do you have anything to offer? Hope you feel better soon.
Yeah.
Anyone here?
Nope, sounds good.
Then I will declare the meeting adjourned.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, everyone.
How bad weather gets, huh?
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.